Broughan, who's 30 seconds.
Well, Minister, as you know, we've been a net contributor to the European Union since 2014. I think we're one of 9 of the current 28 who are now net contributors, with an amount, I think, of 2.7 billion or so being our contribution for 2018. So I'm asking you in relation to 2019-2020, how do you envisage this sum rising? As you know, it's a very large contribution. It's approximately, for example, twice the size of the Garda budget, which we're making year in, year out. And how do you reckon, particularly a no-deal Brexit and the MFF will impact on it?
As the Deputy will be aware, the European Commission's proposal for the MMF were published on the 2nd of May this year. I welcome the publication of the proposal, which marks the start of an important debate on the future of the EU budget. The proposals come at a time of great change and adjustment for the EU, with new priorities and the departure of the UK. As the Deputy will also be aware, with Ireland's growing prosperity, we have moved from being a net beneficiary to a net contributor to the EU budget. As such, it's important that the next MFF will be an appropriately sized spending plan for the EU 27 in a post-Brexit era, and that it will be capable of meeting the priorities of the Union. Negotiations and those priorities and how they should be funded will be complex. So to answer one of the questions you put to me, how does Brexit impact all of this? It impacts on it in 2 different ways. Firstly, obviously, the level of contribution that the UK are making will not continue into the future. They will be honouring some commitments that they have, but clearly they won't be contributing to future European Union budgets in the way they have in the past if they're not in it. Of course, the second effect that it has is this does not lessen the demand for expenditure from the European budget in other member states. So the level of demand is there for the same or higher levels of expenditure, and one of the key contributors to this will no longer be involved in the negotiation. In relation to Ireland's contribution under the next MFF, the European Commission's post-2020 proposal will lead to an increase in Ireland's contributions to the EU budget. As the Deputy will be aware, the Taoiseach has already said we're open to contributing more. Clearly, however, we need to ensure that our core priorities are protected. It's difficult to be definitive regarding the level of projected negotiations for the key reason that the actual negotiations have yet to commence.
Thanks, Minister, and thanks for that reply. Well, I mean, what's your own view in relation to the Commission proposal in the MFF? I mean, do you agree with that 1.111 of GNI? Would you prefer that it would be a higher figure or a lower figure? I mean, like, what's Ireland's position? You're saying the Taoiseach is saying that we're prepared to pay more as you know, one of the 9 net contributors now to the European Union, but like exactly in what kind of territory? Your former colleague Commissioner Hogan, I think he wanted something like a 1.2% of GNI or even 1.3% of GNI. Is that the kind of territory that you're in? And in relation, to Brexit, I mean, is there any contingency planning by the department about the kind of additional funding that we'll have to find for Europe? I know it was your colleague Brian Hayes, MEP, member of the European Parliament, puts a figure of an additional maybe 200 million, you know, given the net impact of Britain leaving, but continuing to pay perhaps for passporting rights, for the open skies policy and so on. So is serious work being done, Minister, by the department in this area, given that this 3 billion a year now, plus perhaps, is a huge, it's going to have a huge impact on our future budgets?
Minister.
Yes, a huge amount of work is being done in relation to this, Deputy. In relation to your question regarding my view regarding what the future level of contribution should be, if I was to say that here today, Deputy, I would probably be the first minister involved in these negotiations to be outlining a figure in relation to our potential contribution in the future. We are at the very, very, very early stage of these negotiations. At this point in time, it is sufficient for Ireland to be saying very clearly that we believe that more should be paid if our core priorities can be protected. There are many other member states that have not even gone that far. In terms of, do we know what the future level of contribution will be once the United Kingdom leave? At this point in time, it's difficult to put a definitive figure on this because there are so many open areas still in relation to the negotiation between the UK and the EU.
Would you think, though, Minister, that the kind of territory that your colleague Deputy Hayes in the European Parliament is thinking, that it would be of that order, or could it be much more significant? Because obviously, as we go on post 2020 and begin to deal with this new MFF, clearly there is a huge and growing impact on our budgets, and we obviously have concerns also that the common agricultural policy, for example, that there will be gaps there. Is there any indicative area of the size, if you like, of the financial gap or the hole that would be left, the net gap that would be left by the UK leaving? Is it something that has to be on the department's horizon, and also, of course, in the context of President Macron, who, of course, was a very happy spectator last night at the football, but with his vision for Europe, which also will have huge impacts on our future contributions.
Final response.
Also, the bit in the middle of your question to me regarding the concerns that we have in relation to funding for the Common Agricultural Policy, also the desire that we have to protect, for example, funding in Erasmus, in research and development, that I am being careful regarding putting a figure on a future Irish contribution. We're not engaged in a dialogue in relation to this, Deputy. This is a negotiation, as you well know and you well understand. If I'm to say here today what I believe the level of Irish contribution will be in the future, before we have secured agreement in relation to the production, the protection of funding programmes that are important here to Ireland, it will undermine our ability to secure our national interest in these negotiations. Our contribution will go up. The degree to which it will go up will depend upon our ability to secure areas that are important to Ireland. In relation to some of the proposals that President Macron has in relation to the future of the European Union budget, as you know, there are some areas that we are concerned about and wouldn't be in a position to support. For example, in relation to the implementation of a CCCTB across Ireland. But there are other areas in which we will be engaging with the European Commission to come up with a new budget, because we will need one, and we will need a more modern one than we have now.
Move on to question 67.